I typically do, okay, this guy I can close in 30 days. This guy is probably going to be like my 30 to say 90 days. And then this guy is like 90 plus. I'm not really sure where he falls in. And then I'm going to have different touch points based on which bucket I've put them in. Right. So I flagged them. And then if they're in my A bucket, like close in 30 days, these are the people that I need to be reaching out to on a regular basis.
Is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Our guest today lays out a plan for you to convert leads that's working for him. He's an expert in getting leads in the door, but then also the lead conversion portion. And I would bet that if you're trying to raise money, you're probably failing at this part of the business. But maybe not everybody, but often we're so focused on getting leads in that we don't think about the conversion point. His name is Mark Updegraff. He actually has, I want to tell you at the very beginning of the episode here, he has a gift for you that lays out some of this stuff. And it's at raisecapital.com/Whitney. And that's RAZE capital.com/Whitney. I'd love for you to go get that. It's something he's worked on that would help you, I think, in this process. But he's the CEO of Raise Capital of Updegraff Companies. Raise Capital, they rehabilitate neglected properties and fully refurbished market rate rental homes. And he's in New York, and they specialize in the management, the brokerage, residential, commercial, and mixed-use properties. Began his career at NASA, and not just everybody on the show has done that. Very interesting background. He pivoted into real estate in 2008, and he's passionate about providing safe, clean, affordable, sustainable housing for communities while stimulating the economy through creativity, innovation, workforce development. He's an active coach and leader as well, but you're going to hear us dive into his specific marketing platform where he gets them in the door, even cold callings, and how he handles that conversation and what happens after. And I find most people don't share what they do like Mark did today. Mark, welcome to the show. Honored to have you on. As the more I've read about you, and I'm looking forward to diving into your specialty. And yeah, not too many people we've had on the show began their career at NASA, and so that's an interesting fact about you. But give the listeners a little more about who Mark is, and let's jump in.
Hey, thanks, Whitney, for having me on the show. I'm a longtime listener. I'm really honored to be here. You've got incredible guests that come on. My background was in technology. I was very strong in math and science when I grew up, and I really had a love for the arts. So I didn't want to turn my back on that either. I found a program in Rochester, New York at RIT that combined both the best of both worlds. It's very science heavy, which was something I excelled at, but then I also got some photography, namely nature photography, studio photography, but then also like high speed imaging and stuff like that. So the degree was really awesome. I loved it, and I don't regret going through school for that. Went and worked in industry, realized that I wasn't gonna make a ton of money in my W-2 with the bachelor's of science. So I went back, like a lot of people do, got another degree, a master's, went back into the workforce, and I still wasn't really earning as much as I had hoped. And when I talked to some of the scientists that had been doing it for decades that were getting towards the end of their careers, they're like, "Yeah, the path to wealth is not as a scientist." So I had started investing in real estate when I was still doing my master's studies, and I had a few units, and I could see the power of passive investing. And that's when I decided to transition over to real estate full time. I still needed to replace that W-2 income to pay some of my bills. So I decided to get licensed as a real estate agent first, and then ultimately as a broker, where I branched off and started my own brokerage and started my own management company just to help support people. I've got the abundance mindset, and it's easy being in Rochester because we've got so many good equitable deals that, I as one person could only buy so many properties, but I had no problem sourcing many, many good cash flowing investments. And so I had a lot of people that would come to me early on and they would want to get active in the Rochester market. I would kind of hold their hand through that process, and then we would pick up the management to make sure that their asset was being taken care of and that they could build some legacy wealth moving forward.
Nice, nice. And well, why? I guess why real estate or multifamily for you versus some other type of investing or many other paths to maybe create passive income?
I just feel like the amount of money that you can make in real estate is just a factor higher than any other widget that you could possibly invest in. Real estate's got some really unique benefits on the tax side of things. And as a real estate professional and a broker, As soon as I made like my first $100,000 profit on a transaction, I was completely hooked because I'm like, okay, I went from a W-2 where I didn't even make $100,000 in a year to being able to do one transaction where I made more money just doing that. So I got bit by the real estate bug, just not only for the passive investment side, but also the active side.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you and me both. I mean, when that first deal happens, like that large transaction, man, this just doesn't make sense to stay in that W-2, right? But oh, wow. Well, thanks for sharing that, Mark. Let's jump into some of your, let's call it your superpower, your thing that, that you focus on are really good at. You even said when we were talking about this before we started recording that if you're not good at getting leads in the door or lead conversion, ultimately you just almost have no business, right? Or
Mhm.
eventually. But I want to jump in there because I get questions about this often as well. That especially in the current climate when it's harder to raise capital now than it has been for many years, I think. And I've seen that across many people who are in this business and have been able to raise lots of capital. Man, it's harder now than ever. But I think your skill set can help all of us in a big way when we're thinking about how we're reaching out to that person, how we're finding new leads and converting them, all that stuff. I want to jump in there. How are you doing that? Let's dive into a little bit of that process so we can help the listener and myself.
Sure. So one of the things that I teach my mentees is when you're making that cold call, a lot of people, I make them role play. Number one, we do a lot of role playing, but I think a mistake that people make, and I've never been coached by anybody in lead conversion. I just kind of figured it out on my own. Is that when they call somebody, they say, "Hey, this is Mark from Raise Capital LLC." Immediately they've got their guard up, right? Because you just announced that you're a salesperson, right? So number one, I never do that. I never say, "This is Mark Updegraff with Raise Capital LLC." I say, "Hey, ring, 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 ring. Hello." I'm like, "Hey, this is Mark Updegraff." Typically they say, "Mark who?" Right? Because like I got a kind of a weird last name, and they're like, "I don't think I know this person, but maybe I do." And so I've kind of shifted them off guard where they're not really expecting it to necessarily be a sales call. And then I just want to be personable moving forward. And I'm going to let them know why I called, right? So maybe they went to one of my resources. Maybe it's an ebook. My particular avatar is helping active investors, right? Because I had been an active investor for years. And so I'll publish a lot of content and resources for active investors to help make their lives easy. So let's say they go onto one of these things, they enter their information, and I call them. It's a cold call, but I've gotten through that initial barrier by not announcing that I'm a salesperson, and then I can ease myself into the conversation, and I can build that initial relationship before I go ahead and schedule a more formal like Zoom call where we can get a face to face and we can talk the nitty gritty if we've established that we'd be a good fit together. And I think that one component is huge in sales, and it's something that I see when people are coming into the sales side of things that they really don't understand. They get a lot of pushback, and they're just so you've had sales calls, and when you get one, you're like, "Ugh, how am I going to get off the phone as quickly as possible?" But if you take the approach that I have, I really don't run into that stumbling block. Usually, even if they don't want to do business with me, they're still going to talk to me a little bit, and I can get to know them a little bit, and I can put some notes in, and it's like a pleasurable conversation versus like this confrontation with the salesperson that I'm just trying to get off the phone with.
Yeah. So instead of saying your name and I'm this such and such capital, ultimately you're just saying your name and this is why
Yeah.
I called.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm
Interesting.
giving yep, I'm letting them deflect back and, then, just kinda ease in nice and easy.
Yeah. What about, how did you get their number anyway? You mentioned maybe white paper or something like that, but
Mhm.
maybe even back up before. How did you even get their information to say, make that call? How did you get them in your funnel?
Yeah, so I've got a lot of different avenues to attain people's information, right? So you can have anything from a pure cold call where you're, like, looking up that person. So I'll do a lot of, like, public record type searching. In our MSA, there's different ways that you can get in and you can see property owners, you can see their phone numbers, and so I can direct call from there. My scripting will be a little bit different if I'm taking that approach, but a lot of it is gonna be people that have actually reached out to me, and it's more of a warm introduction. So if you can get those warm leads, they're going to convert at a higher rate. A lot of that is going to be based on the content that you're putting out there and the reputation that you're building within your community, and that you almost don't know that people are seeing it and that people are reading it and appreciating it because you don't get a lot of online responses, right? You might post something that you think, "Oh, I spent a couple hours working on this. It was great, and I got like 3 comments." you can't get distracted by, oh, I only got 3 comments, because you're getting the right eyeballs on it and they might not be saying anything. Right. So I've run into people in the streets and they're like, "Hey, I saw that article that you wrote about XYZ. It was really great. We should link up and go down and have lunch." So I think like the belly to belly is really where you're going to get that push on your final conversion if you can get face to face with somebody, or get a Zoom. So my goal is always to take all these different lead sources and get them face to face, whether they're local or maybe they're far, and we've got to jump on a Zoom call.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I agree. If you can, they can see your face. It's just much more personal conversation, right? I just find you have a different conversation because of that interaction by far. All right, so you have the phone call. Talk through the just lead conversion process a little bit. I think we're all pretty horrible at it, honestly. And we focus so much on getting new leads in the door and don't normally even do that well. But we focus so much there that we forget about the people who signed up 6 months
Yeah.
ago or a year ago, or, or even further, right? Some of us have
Yep.
massive lists of people who actually signed up, right? And I'm as guilty as anybody, just so everybody knows. But, it's like you have this massive list and you still focus so much on new leads that you forget about, right, these that already showed interest in you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I treat everything like ping pong when it comes to lead conversion. So anytime something comes at me, I want to volley it right back so the person knows I'm responsive, I'm doing my job. So that's going to go a long way. But what you want to do is, after you've taken the lead in, right, you've converted it, you've had that consultation that was maybe a half hour where they've gotten to know you, know about your business, know about your offerings. You're going to classify them typically in one of like 3 buckets. I typically do, okay, this guy I can close in 30 days. This guy is probably going to be like my 30 to say 90 days. And then this guy is like 90 plus. I'm not really sure where he falls in. And then I'm going to have different touch points based on which bucket I've put them in. Right. So I flagged them. And then if they're in my A bucket, like close in 30 days, these are the people that I need to be reaching out to on a regular basis. And some of the systems you can have can be automated, right? We can have some automated emails, we can have some automated texts. But whenever you get a response or you get an open, then you've got to take a little bit more action, or somebody on your team has to take a little bit more action to make sure that you're reaching out to them and letting them know about any current opportunities that they might want to invest in. So I think having those buckets can help you focus on which ones are convertible now without losing the ones that are convertible later, right? So on my B bucket, I might, on my time schedule for the week, my A bucket's going to probably be like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They're going to have a slot where I go through and I touch everybody in the A group. In the B group, I might only have one slot during each week. And then on my C group, I might only have one slot during the whole month, right? And then as I move those people from bucket to bucket, then they'll have different touch points based on which bucket I put them in. And I can always keep tweaking it. Maybe I put somebody in the wrong bucket. I put them in the A bucket, but it turns out they should really be in the B bucket. I can just slide them over.
And
So that's kind of how I operate.
speak a little more into like how you know who goes in which bucket.
I ask them specifically. So those are some of the questions that I drill down on. I say, "Hey, we're doing this actively. I have a lot of clients that invest now. I have clients that invest tomorrow. I'm just trying to figure out, if I had an opportunity today, would you guys be ready to pull the trigger?" Yeah, sure, I would. Okay, sweet. You're in the A bucket. No, I'm selling a house. I'm going to have my equity, and I'm going to want to put it in probably in 2 months after it sells and the check clears or something like that. Or my kid's going to college. I really want to get those college tuition checks written, and then I'll see what I have left. And so that's probably like 6 months out. So I'm having that conversation early on, and I'm totally transparent. So they understand why I'm asking the question is because I'm going to be working for them. And if they're not ready, then they don't want me to work for them because they're not ready. So it's kind of like a mutual respect
Yeah.
kind of thing.
No, it's interesting. Just ask them. Right.
Mhm.
It seems more complicated than that, or like it should be. But yeah, they can just tell you. That's great. So what does that look like then, as far as how you are following up, or what is that? You got the different buckets. I guess talk
Mhm.
about what's in those different buckets and maybe what you're feeding them or how you are converting those leads.
Yeah, so the 30-day bucket, I wanna be really, really active with them. So those are gonna be the ones that I'm calling and I'm texting personally, or somebody from my team is. Like, maybe they think it's me, but, it's coming from my phone, but I'm busy, so I'm not the one that's actually doing it. So those are the ones that you focus on getting across the finish line and getting closed. And so those are very labor intensive, they're personal. There's not a whole lot of like drip type stuff or automated type stuff. The automated stuff falls in for your B and your C bucket. because those are the ones that, you will have those touch points. Like I am going to call them, but just not as frequently. With the A bucket, I really don't need automation because I'm just trying to get them to the sale because they told me, hey, I'm ready to do this. Usually strike when the iron's hot, right? Because somebody might be ready today and then they change their mind tomorrow. So if somebody says, hey, I'm ready to make a buy decision. My goal every day is to figure out what it is they are trying to buy, which investment makes the most sense for them.
Makes complete sense. Okay, so that you're calling, texting, yeah, you're much more involved with that person. I like that. Strike when the iron's hot. They've already told you they're ready right then. But all right, so the BC buckets, is that 60, 90 days? Is that, or maybe longer than that? How do you determine the
Yeah.
length of time and what are in those buckets?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say it's like the 30 to 90 is the B bucket, but it's kind of like it's not a science, right? It's kind of like you kind of feel it out. Like, okay, I'm pretty sure I can close this guy. He's going in A. This guy is going to take a little bit longer, so I'm going to put him in B. It's all going to be based on lead flow, right? So if I didn't have enough leads, I would be able to spend more time on my Bs and my Cs. But as a lead generator, somebody that's spent years building up this content base and being able to get these organic leads and then also get some paid leads coming in, I've got enough leads where it's probably the problem that a lot of people have when they have these big databases is like, how do you parse through it and how do you know who to stay active with, right? So that becomes the problem. But as somebody that's starting out, you probably don't have that many and you can really focus on making sure everybody's getting good service. But at the end of the day, it's all about customer service. So anytime somebody opens something or texts or does whatever, I want to make sure that they're getting a personal response from somebody.
Okay. So are you encouraging them, say through email campaigns, things like that, to text or call or those things?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we use automated texts. I think texting, like when that became automated, that was a huge game changer for lead conversion, right? Because I can use programmatic language in my automated texts that can convince somebody that I didn't have a computer write it. They might be getting a little bit more savvy, but I'm pretty good at tricking people. You can use time of day, you can use season, and there's a whole bunch of other programmatic things that you can sprinkle into the message. And so they're like, well, they don't realize that I'm not writing it, right? But then if they respond, that's when the personal touch comes in because now you've got them. You've got the engagement, and whenever you have engagement, your conversion rate drops off a cliff after about 5 minutes. So I'm always looking for that engagement, and whenever I have the engagement, then I try to seize on it. And then when I seize it, it'll give me another touch point with that person, and then I'll be able to evaluate whether they're in the right bucket. Maybe, okay, I got this guy from the B, he engaged. Now I talk to him and I'm like, all right, now he's in the A because he's been in the B long enough and he's ready. So now I moved him to the A and now he's getting different touch points.
And what do you use for the automated text?
So I'm switching over to Go High Level right now, but I've used a number of CRMs in the past, and I think most all of them have a automated text feature. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people like Active Campaign in the capital raising space.
Yeah. Is that the CRM that you use, Active Campaign?
I'm no, I'm using Go High Level.
Go High Level is the CRM.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know if I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're a little bit more robust in some areas, and then some people think they're a little bit lacking in other areas. I've got so many different companies that I wanted to just have one platform, and Go High Level was a better fit for me, right? Because we're still bringing in leads for roofing or windows or kitchens or sales or whatever. So I have all these leads coming in through one channel, and then I can divvy them out to the appropriate sales agents.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you find that is something that's intuitive and something easy for the team to use, or is it like how complicated, I guess, would you rank something like Go High Level?
It's more complicated to get it set up than it is to use it. So once it's set up, the users really don't have much. Yeah, it's pretty intuitive.
Okay. No, any experience with something like, because I get this question too often, like HubSpot, Salesforce, those things, or how would you rank Go High Level with us?
I've never done Salesforce because it's always been a little bit more expensive than I wanted to spend. And most of the CRMs that I started with early on were more focused on the real estate brokerage side, but I was able to tailor them to kind of do what I wanted. So most of
Yeah.
mine would have been like I've been on Boomtown, Chimes, or Bull, like you name it. I've used it.
Okay. No, that's interesting. I just get questions about CRMs all the time. And so, all right. So B and C buckets, we talked about that a little bit. Speak to maybe the frequency that you're reaching out to that B versus C. Maybe you mentioned that a little bit, but how is it just text? Are you also doing emails or how often? Some of those things.
It's going to depend on the notes that I have for the person because every person has a little bit different of a communication style. Some people really don't want to be bothered on the phone. And if it's one of those people that'll be in my notes, I'm not going to call them. Maybe they're a doctor or they're a lawyer or something. I will still speak to them on the phone, but I'm not going to have that as one of my primary touch points. It'll probably be a text message. And so a lot of that's going to come into the note taking that I do on the initial call that I have with them and then the subsequent Zoom call where I'm really flushing out their character. I'm putting in as much information as I can. Anytime I do business with anyone, they end up in my phone. And inside of my phone, along with the name, the phone number, the email, I've got a note section. And that way, so Whitney, if you ever call me, I'm going to know you're calling me. Even if it's 10 years from now, I'll say, hey, Whitney, how's it going? How you been? I haven't heard from you in a long time. And I'll put on like the company info because it flashes up when the phone rings. I'll put any notes that I want to see when the incoming call is coming in. So I've had people that I put in my phone a decade ago that'll call me. They won't think that I remember them, but I have them in my phone and I've got a long enough note where I can remember how I know them and what what my interaction was. So that's kind of how I do it, right? Because you can't just have a one system for all people because people aren't the same. Some people are going to be upset if you call them too much. Some people are going to be upset if you text them too much. Some people are going to be upset if you email them too much. So that's another one of the questions that I dig in at the beginning. I'm like, what kind of communication style do you like, and what kind of frequency do you like? Because I don't want to be the person that's giving you spam. I don't want you to delete me from your list and block me. And like, I want to give you what you want. What is it that you want? And so after they tell me that, then I can have them programmatically in my system and I have different tiers set up. So I could say, hey, if you choose this one, you can expect I'll just text you. And then if I've got a screaming deal and I think it's something that we talked about that would be in line with your investment goals, then we really should hop on a call, but I'll text you first that we can schedule it. Something
That's
like that.
nice. Yeah, no, that's really good. And just tailoring it. But one thing there, I know that probably caught the listener's attention too. Like you're able to see that note when somebody pops up on the phone, somebody's calling you. Is that because of the way like you're saving their name, their last name, and then putting it right there so you see it when it pops up, or do you have a different software or app or something that does that for you?
No. I'm an Apple fanboy. I've never owned a PC and I've had an Apple iPhone since they came out, starting with the first generation. On the iPhone, you could put the name and then on the company, which is the line right under that in your contact, that will show up when somebody calls you. So as long as I put it in that field, instead of putting, hey, they work at IBM, maybe I do put that, but I'm going to use it for my notes. So I might say like, I usually put the lead source, I put the year that I got it, and then I put any pertinent information about the person that I'm going to want to remember when they call me.
Yeah, love that. So I've done some similar stuff like that, but not been as consistent as I need to be about adding that in there when I add people as a contact. But I think it's a great idea. I haven't thought about that. So when they call, it does show up right there just to remind you. I love that idea. What are some just last thoughts about maybe closing that lead or getting that lead in the door? Maybe some tips or success tips that you've had to make that happen.
I think if you do your job and you're not a salesy person, you're just adding value, the leads are going to naturally close. So that's a question that I get a lot. And when I try to like reflect on what it is that I do, I almost say that like I don't do anything, right? I'm not trying to get anybody to do anything. They can do it or they don't have to do it. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to explain to them the offering. And if they want to do it, great. And if they don't want to do it, that's great too. They can usually tell by my demeanor, my personality, and then my expertise that I know what I'm doing and they're not going to waste my time pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what about before I move on, I wanted to ask you just one other thing though about how are you using AI in this process as well?
I'm using AI a lot for lead generation. I think AI is really going to boost people's ability to generate leads, more leads quicker, right? So even we were talking before we went on, there's a new Otter.ai that's a person that comes into this Zoom room and then it takes a bunch of notes, it transcribes the meeting, and then at the end of the meeting, that transcription comes back out as text. So now you can take that text, you can feed it into like a chat GPT, And not only can you get yourself a summary and an outline, maybe action items, you could also turn it into content, right? So if we're talking about some really good stuff that might make the basis of like an ebook, you could start with that as your basis for the ebook, feed it in. What I do in ChatGPT, because a lot of people are very sensitive and they're like, hey, if I know this person is just creating content with ChatGPT, I'm not going to follow them. I think it's stupid. It's not whatever. They don't like it. Right. So when I'm using ChatGPT, I'm training it to sound like me. And the way that I do that is I feed it in a lot of stuff that I've written and I explain to it how I write. And I kind of talk to it like a person, even though it's an AI, to really get it to understand what are the rules to sound like Mark Updegraff. And not only that, it's about the prompts that you put into it, right? So even after I've given it all these rules of how to sound like me, when I'm going to create content, I'm not just going to tell it to write an ebook about XYZ, right? I am going to say, hey, we're going to work on this ebook and my prompt is probably going to be several thousand words of text, right? It's almost like I'm writing an ebook in short form, right? And I don't have to it's almost like a brain dump. I don't have to worry about if I said something in the right order. I don't have to worry about any of that. I can just get everything that I want to get out and throw it in there. And then maybe I've got a couple transcripts because I've been on some shows talking about stuff like that. Throw those in there, give it all the content, let it do its thing, read it, and then start tweaking it from there. You want to break it down into sections, so you'll read one section that it wrote, you'll probably just rewrite it and then do a final proof check on it and you're good. So it really accelerates your time. You can get things done a lot quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've learned more and more about AI, and it's interesting how the importance on how you prompt it, right? And how you ask the questions, information you give it. It's a weird dynamic, right? That you're speaking to the computer, but it's yeah, everybody says you got to talk to it like a person. And that's so hard to wrap my mind around sometimes. But Mark, what's the biggest challenge in your business right now?
I mean, we're waiting for better deals. I've got a lot of investors that have money sitting on the sidelines, and I just can't really find much that I'm willing to pull the trigger on. So I think sourcing deals, everybody's waiting to see what's going to shake out. And if we are writing offers, they're at like 70, 80% of the ask. So that disparity is still there. And there's not a lot of deals getting signed right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. What about in your marketing or lead generation conversion? What's the big challenge there?
Not too many challenges. I've been getting a lot of sellers, which is nice of some larger multifamily stuff. So I feel like the lead generation has been going pretty well. It's whenever you have so we can't underwrite as well right now. We're looking at a lot of deals. It's almost like pencils down. I'm using that extra time to focus on lead generation. So when I'm really busy underwriting and doing deals, I have less time to work on my leads. So right now I'm actually doing really well on the lead side.
Good, good for you. All right, so I ask pretty much every operator that comes on the show about what their crystal ball is saying right now, and knowing that you don't have one either, I do know that what we all believe is going to happen. It affects what we do today, right? What we think about the future affects what we do today. And so, what predictions do you have, or what are you thinking about 6, 8, 12 months from now, and how is that affecting what you're doing today?
Yeah. So when all these arms reset, I think there's going to be downward pressure. I think prices are going to come down a little bit. And even if they don't come down as much as we would hope, maybe like 10, 20% or whatever, I think there's going to be a lot of distressed sales. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities if you position yourself and the right people to help work out some things that have gone south. So I'm doing a lot of networking. I'm trying to position myself with lenders and with investors and just really have my ear to the ground as far as what's coming down the pipe as far as an opportunity there where we can pick something up on hopefully like 10, 20 cents on the dollar. That's my hope.
Yeah, I know that we talked about marketing some today, or really the conversion process that you take your leads through. I always like to ask you what's your best source for meeting new investors right now?
Bigger Pockets has always been a great source. They don't only tailor to new investors, they also have a lot of really sophisticated people on the platform. Sometimes they might not be as vocal, but they're there. So keeping your content fresh on that site can be helpful.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't hear as many people like I guess in recent year or two, like mention Bigger Pockets. And so you're saying you're putting content on there, or you're putting blogs or things like that on Bigger Pockets?
I think I did enough of it early on. I was one of the early adopters to the space, and I've got enough stuff out there that I organically get a lot through Bigger Pockets. I don't know if I'm just getting lucky, if it's my marketplace or what, but
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some of the most important metrics that you track? And it could be personally or professionally.
yep. So I track my conversion rates. That's one of my key performance indicators that I like to track.
And is that
I'm
something as simple as like how many leads come in compared to how many invest?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the different lead sources, how much I spend for them, and then what my conversion rate is what my conversion rate is. So I can then, when I get to the end of the year, if I want to shift some of my marketing dollars, I can switch them into different allocations because I had better conversion rates. And those things ebb and flow, right? You just don't know how things are going to perform. It could be dependent on a lot of different factors. So I think keeping an eye on that so you can change and pivot to be able to really maximize your spend is key. On the personal side, I'm trying to track like my time with my children. So one of the things I put on as one of my goals this year is to have like a daddy date with my kids. So one kid each week, and then my wife. So I've got 3 kids and a wife. So that's every week I should be taking one of them to do something that's just kind of special with me.
Love that. And the listeners get tired of me talking about it probably, but now I interviewed a friend of mine. His name's Jim Shields. He wrote a book, Family Board Meeting. I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but it's a short read and emphasizes scheduling one-on-one time with the kids. He lays out just a simple way to do that because it seems most of us struggle to make that happen.
Mhm.
But I just highly encourage it. I give the book away for free to even the listeners as well if they email in and want it. So but appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's a great habit that most entrepreneurs we lose focus, right, of what we claim is the most important thing to us. And so, man, that's awesome that you do that. What would you say is the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Persistence, right? You're gonna get knocked down. You just got to get up and don't get stressed out. Keep an even keel. One of the pieces of advice my father gave me that's served me really, really well is like before you say something, think about it and think this specifically. Is it going to help me? If it's not going to help me, then just don't say it, right? Because if it can't help me, it can only hurt me. And so if I can keep that in mind before I say something, that it goes a really long way, especially when you're running an organization, you've got people that work for you, contractors, vendors. It's a small world really, and you say something to somebody, it's going to come back around. So anytime I say anything to anyone, that's what I'm thinking. If it can't help me, it can only hurt me, and I'm just not going to say it.
That's probably very wise right there. Just take a second, ask yourself, is it going to help me or them? Either one. No, that's awesome. Mark, how do you like to give back?
So I would like to start going back on the mission trips that I had gone with my parents when I was younger. They still do it. So we're hoping that now that my kids are a little bit older, we can get them and we can go down. We go down to Honduras and get back there.
That's
Helping
awesome.
with the reconstruction of the villages, and it's a very impoverished area. So helping with the orphanage and
Wow. Good for you, Mark. Appreciate you sharing that and wanting to give him back in that way. Appreciate you just being willing to lay out just your lead conversion process in so much detail for us today and thinking through those buckets, even the phone call, which I feel is so important, right? And one thing you mentioned, I wanted to say again for the listener and myself, it's like you talked about conversion drops off after the first 5 minutes. And it's so interesting. Like think about that and the response time that you have or your organization has as a listener when an investor or new lead reaches out, right? That's hard. It's hard to live up to that. Like get back within 5 minutes and make sure that you're doing that. But thanks again, Mark. Tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
yep. So I'm just at raisecapital.com, RAZE capital.com. And I made a little freebie for you, Whitney. So if they go to raisecapital.com/Whitney, they'll get a guide on marketing for capital raisers, which that's not my avatar. I'd say it's probably more your avatar. So hopefully you like it. I've spent some time on it over the last couple weeks, and hopefully you get some value out of it.
That's awesome. Appreciate that very much. Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.